Hey, it's Alex from Motoroso.com, your dedicated auto parts marketplace. Check out Motoroso.com/shop to browse hundreds of thousands of top name brand products in the automotive aftermarket. Today we're in the studio and we're going to be playing with the Motoroso F150 XLT Super Crew EcoBoost. Now normally we do a lot of performance parts upgrades, but today we're just going to do a quick brake pad replacement. It needs it. We've got 41,000 miles on this truck, which is a lot longer than you would normally go, but it's done a lot of long stretches of highway driving, cross-country trips, and we got a heck of a lot of life out of those pads. So anyways, hope you find the video helpful. Let's get started. Pretty simple set of tools for this installation. You're gonna need a ratchet. I recommend one that extends or is already very long, like a braking bar. You're gonna need a 19mm socket, a 21mm socket, and a 13mm socket, as well as a rubber mallet and a C-clamp. All right, now before you get the truck up on the jack, make sure you loosen each of the lug nuts just enough, because once the wheel's up in the air and you try to untighten them, the wheel's gonna rotate. So I've got locking lug nuts, gotta put my little bit on there first and get each of these just barely cracked. We're gonna slide the jack under, and I'm gonna basically put the jack behind the jack point here, just behind that cross member. Get it right up in there. Get the truck up. Just enough to where the wheel starts picking up off the ground. And then there's an arrow mark on the frame where you can slide the jack stand right underneath that arrow, and that's your jack stand point. Then just simply lower the jack down and rest the truck. Now do this gently. And there it is. All right, now that we got the wheel off, we've got our rotor and caliper exposed. Beautiful view of our Icon Vehicle Dynamic Suspension Kit from here, but we're not talking about that right now. Stay focused, stay focused. We're working on brake pads. So what we're gonna be doing is taking off the caliper. There are two 13mm bolts on the back at the top and the bottom. You're gonna remove those. The outer caliper will come off. That'll reveal your brake pads. And then there are two 20mm bolts, significantly more difficult to remove, and that will allow you to take the rest of the caliper off with the brake pads and remove your rotor. Now, if you're just doing the pads, which I don't advise, but if you're just doing the pads, you don't have to take that second component off. The pads do slide in and out, but here we go.
Now you're going to remove the two 13mm bolts from the top and the bottom of the outer caliper. Once you slide the outer caliper off, make sure to place the caliper up and out of the way so that it's not hanging from the brake line. This can cause damage to the brake line and it'll just be in your way.
All right, now like I mentioned, you could just throw new pads right on the old rotor, but you're not really doing the job right. To do the job right, if your truck's got less than 60,000 miles on it, let's say, and your brakes have not been pulsating while you've been braking, you really probably just want to face the rotors. Now, if it has been pulsating, you might want to just go ahead and replace and get brand new rotors while you're doing this whole job at the same time. Facing rotors is super easy. They just machine a little bit of layer, give you a nice clean surface, and they'll do this at any tire shop or auto shop. Now, the rotor can be a little bit tough to get off, but it's pretty simple. Hit it with a rubber mallet from the back, wiggle it a few times, and it'll slide right off.
As you can see, the rotors are in good condition but do show some signs of wear. We're going to get the rotors faced. That means they're going to pull off a little bit of material from the front and the back of the rotor, giving us a brand new, fresh surface for our new pads to mate to.
All right, we've got our inner caliper out. So while we're waiting for our rotors to get faced, we're going to go ahead and swap out our brake pads. Now you can see the old pads are in the inner caliper, and you can see a massive difference in the thickness of the old pad and the new pad. So this was ready to be done. Now, this couldn't be simpler. In order to remove your brake pads, simply twist it out. It just sits in there. The outer caliper is what holds it in. So pop those out, and additionally, pop out the little metal retaining clips that are in there. They just pop right out. There's a big tab on one side and a small tab on the other. Pop those out. And then pop your new ones in. Simply put the small tab at the very, very back and clip it right in. Do that on all 4 corners. Now your new pads are ready to just simply slide straight in. Couldn't be easier. Okay, we've got our rotors back from the machine shop. They took the just a microscopic layer of metal off of the front. You can see we've got this pristine surface now for our brand new brake pads to mate to. Now that process is something called bedding in, and there's a specific procedure that I'll cover at the end after we put everything back together. Make sure you don't skip this part. It's really important to make sure that you get the best braking performance out of your brakes. So the rotor simply slides right back on. Now it's time to mount the inner caliper and the new pads right over there, so we can jump right in. Make sure that the pads are far enough out that they can slide over the rotor. Place the inner caliper in at the same time as you're placing the bolt through the hole. Line up the top hole first to get the inner caliper just a little bit threaded in so it kind of hangs from that first bolt. Then position and place your bottom bolt. Then use your 21mm ratchet to fully tighten down the inner caliper. Once that's done, press the pads up against the rotor. Your new pads should come with a little bit of silicone grease, which you're going to want to apply to the back side of the new brake pads. Just a little bit goes a long way. Spread it all over the back side of both pads on both sides, being sure not to get any of the silicone grease on the face of the brake pad or the rotor.
Now it's time to reinstall the outer caliper. But first, you're gonna have to press the pistons back into the caliper using our C-clamp to make room to go over the new, thicker pads.
These 2 pistons need to get pressed just a little bit back into the caliper, and the reason for that is because the old brake pads, as they wore down, these pistons were having to push the pads closer to the rotor. Now, because our pads are brand new, they're thicker. We've got to push those back just a little bit so that this outer caliper can go back over the new pads. So you're going to use our C-clamp here to do that, and one of the things that I like to do is use the old brake pad as a plate just to push it right on there, so that now you put your C-clamp over the old brake pad and push both pistons in equally at the same time, because if you push one in, sometimes the other one comes out and it gets a little annoying. All right, we've got our inner caliper mounted back up and tightened down, our outer caliper mounted back up and tightened down. We're basically ready to put the wheel back on and do the other side. Rinse, lather, and repeat. Every step is exactly the same. Then I'll talk about your bedding in procedure. Now make sure to remember that the first time you press the brake pedal, it's gonna go all the way to the floor, very likely. Because we pushed the pistons back, it's gonna be a little soft initially. So we're gonna get that set, then we'll talk about the bedding in procedure. Let's put the wheel back on. All right, your bedding in procedure for your brakes is a process of making sure that your new pads mate to your fresh rotors. It's about getting them hot and mating together and sharing material between each other. It's really the pad material going into the rotor. To do this, find yourself a nice clear road where you can accelerate and brake aggressively without causing a traffic jam or an accident. You're gonna wanna accelerate up to 45 and down to 15, 3 to 4 times in a row with moderate braking force. This is really about just sort of starting to warm up the brakes before you go for your really high heat. So 3 to 4 times, 45 down to 15. You don't need to come to a complete stop. Then 8 to 10 times of 60 miles an hour down to 15 as aggressively as you can brake. You wanna brake hard without triggering your ABS or losing traction. Your brakes are gonna get really, really, really hot during this process. Make sure to let them cool off for a good 10 to 15 minutes after that 8 to 10 run of 60 down to 15. And that's your bedding in process. All right, that's your procedure for changing brake pads on the F-150. And it's pretty standard procedure. You can apply that to just about any vehicle. The products that we use to install on the truck, you can see the links to those in the show notes, which link to the Motoroso.com marketplace, where you can shop for hundreds of thousands of top name brand products in the automotive aftermarket, sold by trusted vendors at great prices, and our shipping is always free. Sign up at Motoroso.com, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and thanks for watching.